Well, here we are, another public interest before corporate interest YouTube presentation. Look, first of all, I'd like to apologise for the bees and the birds. You may hear them in the background, but they're masters of their own destiny. Now, today I want to talk about or discuss the concept of NOW, N-O-W, no other way. I don't know if you've heard that. Now, N-O-W, no other way. Now, we're at the beginning of a very long struggle, because what COVID-19 has done in 2020 is diametrically opposed to what the plague did in the Middle Ages in Europe and the rest of the world, especially in Western Europe, where working people, because labour was scarce, were actually able to begin that long journey towards ensuring that they had part and parcel of the resources of where they lived. They're actually able to bargain. It was the beginning of the concept of trade unionism. It was the beginning of people collectively bargaining, and we saw over the next 400 to 500 years progress which was made. Today in 2020 we have a diametrically opposed problem. If you listen to those who make the rules, who exercise power, they will tell you over and over again, there is no other way. No other way. And the way which they promote constantly, second after second, minute after minute, hour after hour, day after day, week after week, year after year, decade after decade, is the fact that there is no other way. That in order for society to survive and prosper in the 21st century, we need to deregulate, we need to privatise, we need to corporatise, and to a lesser extent, because of COVID-19, we need to globalise. No other way. And while we wait for the COVID-19 crisis to abate, waiting for a vaccine or a treatment, they are organising. And they are organising quickly. They are using the COVID-19 pandemic as their gateway to their brave new world. A brave new world which will be based on tax cuts for the rich. And we've seen the Morrison government is going to fast-track tax cuts. So anybody earning between $45,000 and $200,000 will pay the same rate, 30%. Then we are seeing the push by corporations, not small business, which is on its knees as JobKeeper is slowly whittled away. But what we are seeing is the large corporate sector clamouring for incentives to invest. As I said over previous weeks, this is the first time since 1970 that large corporations in this country are investing more of their profits overseas than they are investing in this country. They are involved in a strike, a capital strike. And that what they are saying to the federal government is, we want incentives. We want taxpayers' dollars, your dollars, so that we can expand our empire. Then the third factor they're looking at is what they call deregulating industrial relations. What that means is putting the final nail in the coffin of the trade union movement and bringing back individual contracts as the main form of bargaining in the workplace. So what they are talking about is more casualisation, more part-time work, no interference from a extinct trade union movement. And even some sectors of the corporate sector are asking for the removal of the minimum wage, because they see the minimum wage in this country has an impediment to them maximising profits. And the large tech companies are at the forefront of this battle. At the very forefront of this battle. The very people that pay no tax are at the very forefront of this battle, because they want to maximise their profits by exploiting their employees. The fourth tier is a concerted attack on industry-based superannuation funds, which to a significant degree are controlled by trade unions. Over $1 trillion sits in industry-based superannuation funds. Most of this money is reinvested back in the stock market, but some of this money is now being used to improve construction in this country and keep people employed. So that's the fourth tier of their attack. And the fifth tier is deregulation. Deregulation, the environmental protections which have been built up over decades of struggle. Deregulation, workplace incentives. Deregulation, deregulating sick pay, workers' compensation, and the list goes on and on. So these are the five things they are telling us that need to be done, and there is no other way. Now. It needs to be done now, no other way. On the other side, you have a dark horse, a rank outsider, a 3,000 to 1 chance. And that's public interest before corporate interests. Now, we have no illusions about how weak we are as an organisation. We don't have the law on our side. We don't have the tech giants on our side. We don't have the legacy media on our side. We don't have the police or the armed forces on our side. We don't have most of the Australians on our side. But what we have that they don't have is policies which are diametrically opposed to their policies which will concentrate power and wealth in fewer and fewer hands. What we have is ideas which put the interests of the many, that's the public, that's right, the many, the public, before the interests of the few, the corporate sector, the investment class in this society. That's what we're about. And although we're rank outsiders, although we're a 3,000 to 1 chance of winning, we are still here offering alternatives and offering mechanisms and strategies by which to make those alternatives part and parcel of the Australian, if not the international landscape. And our policies revolve around, as I've said before, revolve around the concept of a universal basic income for each and every person on this continent to ensure basic necessities are met irrespective of pandemics, bushfires, cyclones, natural disasters, personal issues, sickness. A universal basic income which can easily be financed by the introduction of a number of very mild taxation reforms, which will have minimal impact on corporations' profits. These are 1% stock market turnover tax, a 1% financial transaction tax, having taxes, having our resources, the resources in the ground, the resources owned in this country by First Nations people and the rest of us, to be used for the good of the Australian population, not the pockets of billionaires and transnational corporations. So this is ways you can actually fund a universal basic income. The next three things we are very committed to, we are very concerned about, is public education, public health and aged care in this country. Because what we've seen over the last 4 decades is the privatisation of the aged care sector, which I've spoken about before, the privatisation of large segments of the public education, up to 30% of public education has been privatised. And what that means is that we're using taxpayers' money to fund private organisations, some for profit, some not for profit, some secular, some with weird religious beliefs. Taxpayers' money to fund their ideas. We're concerned about the destruction of Medicare over the years. There's been a concerted effort to dilute Medicare to such a degree that individual doctors are forced to charge up front in order to survive. So public education, public health, aged care in this country. These are things that we are exceptionally interested in, and these are things which could be again funded by the same taxes which would raise enough revenue to look after, to fund a universal basic income. But we're told now is not the time. There is no other alternative. And another issue we're extremely interested in is expanding the economy in this country. Not the private sector, not the public sector, by providing seeding funding through superannuation funds, especially industry-based funds, provide seeding funding for the creation of collectives and cooperatives. Nobody becomes rich working or being part of a collective or a cooperative, but their basic needs are met and they have disposable income in order to enjoy a reasonable life for themselves and their children. Now, I don't understand why we are told now is not the time. There is no other way. I have no understanding why so many Australians believe that's peddled, that there is no other way, that we need to support the corporate sector. We need to make the sacrifices for them so they can maximise their profits. When you consider that we only have 25 million people living on a resource-rich continent, and we have 700,000 children living in poverty, it'll be up to 1 million within the next 2 or 3 weeks, that as wage keeper and wage seeker is wound down over the next 6 months, we will see dislocation in this community which will be hard to comprehend, the impact it will have on so many people. And we are told there is no other way but to continue the push that's been provided by government and corporations over the last 4 decades, a push to deregulate, privatise, corporatise, globalise. I'd like to make a special appeal to all those small businesses and micro businesses in this country, especially those micro businesses that don't employ labour. Because for far too long, small businesses thought it is part and parcel of the system. The reality is that of the 5 million small businesses in this country, over 1 million will disappear over the next 12 months. And the space will be taken up by the corporate sector, especially those that are involved in providing goods and services to people. And we've seen this with the tech giants dominating the economic activity during the COVID-19 crisis. Now, I am sure if you asked the Gurindji 40 years ago, or was it 50 years ago, when they walked off their stations the stations they were working at in the Northern Territory, where they were paid with food and blankets. This is the 1960s, and walked off to Wave Hill and refused to be part of the system. And 8 years later, under the Whitlam Labor government, they achieved land rights. I am sure that if you asked them when they walked off that area, those lands which traditionally belonged to them, which now belong to large agribusinesses, they would have told you there is another way. I am sure when Mabo, Rice and Passy began their 10-year odyssey through the Queensland and High Court and achieved land rights for this country's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, I am sure they would have told you when they started on that journey that there was another way, and they demonstrated there was another way. I am sure all those trade unionists and workers who've been involved in strikes and occupations over the decades to improve working conditions, to decrease the number of deaths on worksite, to ensure the families of those who died on worksites were looked after, to ensure there was an adequate workers' compensation system, to ensure that people received a fair return for their labour. I am sure they were told when they began those campaigns there was no other way. Now is the time to teach everybody that there is another way. There are many ways to approach issues. There are many ways to approach issues. There are many ways to solve problems. And what we need to understand is there are other ways. It doesn't matter how powerful they are. It doesn't matter if they create the laws. It doesn't matter if they implement the laws. It doesn't matter if they've got the wealth. It doesn't matter if they have the disciplinary arm of the states, police and military on their side. The fact is, they have nothing except force to ensure that we continue on the same pathway, to continue to believe there is no other way. There is another way, and public interest before corporate interest, irrespective of how weak we are, irrespective of the fact we are still not a registered federal political party, irrespective of the forces against us, irrespective of us being a 3,000 to 1 rank outsider in this handicap race to ensure that the Australian people benefit from the resources of this country, not individuals, not local billionaires, not transnational corporations. I can assure you that we will be part of that resistance to their agenda. They are exploiting the COVID-19 crisis to maximise their profits at the expense of ordinary people. So, if you want to join public interest before corporate interests, you can go to the website pibci.net, download the application form. The sooner we have 550 members on the Commonwealth electoral, the federal electoral roll, the sooner we can apply for registration as a federal political party, the sooner we can actually introduce different ideas during political campaigns. That doesn't mean we don't believe in direct action, strikes, occupations, community boycotts. Of course we do. But we are willing to use every legal option which is available to us to ensure that people understand there is another way. Thank you, and my apologies for the bees and the birds. They have realised a long time ago that corporatisation, globalisation, privatisation and deregulation are a total lie.